So we've been talking about a couple of bad teams in the NFL, one being the Dallas Cowboys. We've also mixed in the Chicago Bears. Another team that has lost 5 in a row is the Las Vegas Raiders. They went to Cincinnati yesterday and got sandblasted by the Bengals. And apparently that was enough. Antonio Pierce had called out Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, earlier in the week, saying, listen, the lack of production on offense, that is, the coordinator's responsible for that, et cetera, et cetera. So the Raiders decided after the game yesterday, as they head into their bye week, they have fired Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, and they've also fired the offensive line coach, James Craig, and quarterbacks coach, Rick Scangarello. So all 3 gone following the loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. So AP's not messing around, and it appears that there's going to be maybe even more changes there. I don't know what they're going to do at the trade deadline, but all 3 of those guys are out there in Las Vegas.
The tough thing about this is it's not going to fix their issues. This isn't going to create a spark. They needed a quarterback before the season. And they found themselves now in this position where it was Minshew, then AOC, and now you've got Desmond Ridder, who I thought provided a little bit of a spark, played okay for them. It's not going to be enough. Their roster's not there yet. At the quarterback spot, it's going to be tough. I think the toughest part, too, is when you strain your staff. I mean, you're getting rid of a significant portion of your coaching staff, whether it's Scangarello at quarterback or Getsy, who's your play caller, now your O-line coach. I mean, you better have a big enough staff to be able to overcome that so more guys aren't overburdened with their preparation, what they're doing. So that's one of the difficulties of moving on. And I think most people on the outside, they view something like this and they say, oh, like this is a negative thing. These guys weren't producing. They were doing a good job. Based on how the season's going, if Antonio Pierce is going to get fired at the end of the season, he actually may be doing them a favor. In all seriousness, like he actually may be allowing them to then have a shot at getting another coaching job at some point later this season, instead of waiting until at the end of the year where there's a mad scramble. Now these guys might have a better opportunity to prepare themselves for whatever that next opportunity is. So it seems like it's a bad thing for them, but at the end of the day, it actually may be a blessing in disguise.
They don't have a quarterback. And I think that's the catalyst of all of this, is that you can't win pretty much at any level without a quarterback, especially at the pro level. And if there were any type of possible reprieve for AP, it's show that you're trying to take this team in the right direction while you don't have a quarterback, and whatever those decisions may be are those decisions, almost as though you're getting judged and you're getting measured and weighed by what you're able to do while we're handicapped without having a real franchise quarterback or a potential franchise quarterback at the helm. I really feel like that's what this is about. You get rid of the offensive line coach, you get rid of the OC and that, quarterbacks coach and the O-line coach. I really believe that that's kind of more or less saying that we have now identified what we need to work on, or what we need to get out of those positions in particular, and we're not getting them right now. And maybe that makes the case for Coach Pierce to maintain his job. Like, not only do we need a quarterback, we need to improve our offensive line. We need to coach them up better than that, even though we don't have a tremendous asset at the quarterback's position. I don't think too many people would debate the fact that the Las Vegas Raiders are playing a season with 2 backup quarterbacks. And I think that gives him a little bit of a conversation, a discussion point, an argument to say, can we at least make a decision on me and what I'm capable of doing off of us having a legitimate player at the quarterback's position?
It's just, I don't know what they were thinking this was going to be when you made the decision to move off of Josh Jacobs. Okay, they're like one of the worst teams. They might be the worst team in the NFL rushing at this point. You traded Davante Adams. It was almost like, and you were here doing the draft show, and I remember because I was listening to the radio version of it, and it's almost like once Atlanta took Michael Penix, that was it. Like the Raiders had there was no plan B almost. It was like, all right, we're here for Penix, and if he's not there, like I don't know what they thought of, if it was even possible for them to try and make a move at that point to go up and get Bo Nix, because Denver took him, I think, one spot ahead of him. But it was almost like at all the air left the building there, and it was like, all right, I guess we're just going to roll with these two guys into the season.
But do you judge the head coach off of that? To me, that's the because if you judge the coach off of not having as critical a piece as your quarterback's position, do you judge the coach off of that and move on? So I feel like there's got to be something more. These firings taking place, there has to be something more in terms of what they're going to measure and weigh if they're going to keep him or not. And I think it's more the way he manages and handles the affairs of the team as a whole in a time where you're trying to build your team to be a winner. I would assume that would be the reasoning behind making these moves.
I think what's really interesting about it, and you know, Jonas can attest to this because he's been a diehard Chicago Bears fan for a long time. You know, it wasn't like Luke Getsy is coming from Chicago with, flying high in like a big passing grade. I mean, I think there was a lot of Bears fans who, when they saw him resurface with the Raiders, were saying to themselves, okay, well, enjoy that experience. So, Jonas, am I wrong in that assessment?
No, and that's why when people were speculating, like, oh, maybe Justin Fields could be a potential. The Raiders could be a suitor for Justin Fields. Like, no, if you remember, like one of the storylines early last year was Justin Fields basically called out Luke Getsy, and they had to like backtrack on it or whatever. So when he got hired, I thought it's kind of an interesting move, but I don't know what that really does for them. I think that what they are has been put in motion for years. Like whether it was the decision to move off of Derek Carr, the decision to move on from Jacobs, Davante Adams. Like there's been talent there. Like there's been opportunities, and they've just come up short. Like they're one of the worst organizations in the NFL. Like we can take shots at the Jets and all these other teams. Like I was listening last night, and Chris Plank, who's a diehard Raiders fan, and he was talking
Sooners fan too.
Yes, that too. He was like making the point that in like the last, I think it was DeSager might have made the point that in the last 20 years or last 22 seasons, the Raiders have started 2-7 in like 11 of them. Like they're brutal, and like they had talent there. And so that's why when you kick around the idea of like, Max Crosby, and you've got, Mark Davis has come out and said, we're not trading him, we're not moving on from him. I don't know that this is a quick fix. It feels like it's another tear down, build back up again. And I don't know what the optimism or the hope is for this team. Like I really don't.
Yeah. It's hard to have much at this point, right? I mean, I think that's fair to say, but you never know. Maybe some of these changes will provide a spark. Oftentimes you've got guys who are kind of waiting in the wings that might be a young, bright, offensive mind, or give a guy an opportunity. You never know how it'll turn out. I just know there's a lot of retreading in the NFL, and right, wrong, or indifferent. Maybe it's the familiarity, maybe it's the understanding of how the NFL game works and how to coach guys at the professional level, but it doesn't always equate to it, being a productive offense. And people, you always hear the phrase, it's a copycat league. You hear that oftentimes because there's a lack of creativity. There's a lack of, coaching staffs that are willing to do things or look at the rules or look how the game is played and be able to adapt or adjust. I mean, just so we get to it, because I'm not sure if we will at some point. I thought one of the things that stood out to me this past weekend was the onside kick between the Arizona Cardinals and the Bears.
Oh, man.
Because now obviously the rules are changed in regards to kind of how you do it, when you do it. And what's become popular in vogue is this onside punt, where you can punt it up in the air, and it gives the kicking team time to obviously run down, knock some guys around, and make a play on the football. And what Jonathan Gannon's team do as soon as he punted the ball, every single player waved their hand like it was a fair catch. And then obviously one player who was closest to it ends up almost like a fly ball, catches it, and the Bears' play was dead. Their onside kick or punt attempt was dead as soon as it began. And that's just one example of like a coaching staff is like, no, we know how we're going to play this out. And sure enough, I don't know that anyone will try another onside punt like that again for that very reason. Because that play is literally over the second the guy waves for fair catch, and the likelihood of him dropping it, I mean, maybe it's still decently high or higher than an onside kick. And so maybe they'll try from that standpoint. But I would think that they're like, all right, let's go back to the drawing board. We got to figure out a different way of doing onside kicks, get the ball back, because that's clearly not going to work. But it's just one example of, a coach in Jonathan Gannon, who I don't know that he gets enough credit for the scheme, the way he's building that roster, that team, and how competitive they've been so far this year. And then you compare it to a team like the Las Vegas Raiders, and you're like, you don't see any of that. There's zero creativity. Obviously production is one point. You have to have talented players to be a part of it. But I look across the league and I'm like, man, you keep seeing coaches recycled through. It's like, give someone else a shot. And maybe that's more of a spark of what Antonio Pierce is trying to do.